Thank you. Take that. All right. Thanks so much. Again, I appreciate the invitation to speak today. I'll be talking about complete streets and Vision Zero towards zero fatal and serious injuries. And my name is Angelo Rao. I'm with a firm called SME. And as was said earlier, I retired from the city of Lakeland, working there from 2015 to about 2020. And I'm proud of the legacy of reducing fatal crashes significantly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that and some other issues. So let me just so today, talk about two concepts: disruptive innovation and the S-curve. I'm sure if you folks are familiar with those two concepts, but I'm hoping to shed a little bit of light on both of them. Also, I'm going to tell three stories. One is about way too close for comfort. The other is really safe and changing people's lives. I have a feeling this is going to be, even though it's the shortest part of the presentation, to me, this is the most important. So disruptive innovation, what is that? So I'm going to do it this way, so you can hear this. I want you to listen to this chord, this guitar chord. See if you can name the song. Now, I don't know if the audience could speak. Anybody? Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. All right. There we go. It's a hint. It's the Beatles. I know that I'm probably the oldest one in the room, so I remember the Beatles. And why I'm telling you this is I find this very, very interesting in terms of disruptive innovation. That the Beatles were the first band ever in the history of the world to play at a stadium with 55,000 screaming fans. First time ever. Okay, 1965. Oh, here we go. Okay, is that good? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the tech support. Because I know I can't do it, so that's pretty cool. So, well, why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because. Okay. All right. Okay, well, thank you. So, listen to this. I hope this will work, because this is kind of give you a sense of what I'm talking about. So you heard the screaming fans, right? 55,000 screaming fans. 4 young lads in their early 20s, a couple of them were in their late teens, screaming at the top of their lungs. The fans couldn't hear a single note, not one note. The only reason why you heard that recording is because folks came up on the stage and recorded them. They couldn't even hear their own music. That's how loud the screaming was, with 55,000 people in this audience. So, understanding that, Vox, one of the big amplifier manufacturers at the time, said, oh my gosh, this is just the beginning. This is not the end, folks. This is the beginning. And they realized, the light bulb went on and said, we have to do something about this because, yeah, it's kind of fun to have the fans not hear a single note and let them scream. But eventually, you got to get the music pumped out to the audience. It's got to happen. They realized that was really important. So, there you go, screaming literally at the top of the lungs. So Vox said, we got to change this. We have to change the character of the way we put our amps together to hear music. And so they're as high as now. They went from 30 stacked to 100 amps, watts, excuse me, to 3,000 watts of power. Not only that, they actually figured out that because of the way stadiums are designed, and remember, this is not the first, this is just, not the end, it's just the beginning, that the way they would engineer the sound was critical. So for example, when Ringo Starr would hit the hi-hat, the folks in the back, the patron number 55,000 would see the strike and then hear it like about 3/4 of a second later. And it was very uncomfortable to do that. So they even figured out that we have to take into account the sound travel to the audience, to these huge, massive stadiums. And so they figured out a way of not only increasing the power, innovate that, but they also engineered how the sound is transmitted to these 55,000 people. Necessity created disruptive innovation, and it just changed the music industry almost overnight because of that. Another example of disruptive innovation. Picture a New York City in 1900. In this picture, they were all horse and buggies except for one car in 1900. Fast forward, my gosh, fast forward, listen to me. To the realm of Henry Ford. Henry Ford, everyone knows who Henry Ford was, of course, right? What you probably may or may not know is that he did not invent the automobile. That was not what he's famous for. He was famous for inventing the assembly line, or at least perfecting the assembly line, to the point that he took what would take 12 hours to build a car down to just 33 minutes, a 22x increase in speed. So what? What about that? Well, in 1913, because of that new innovative solution, now we have the same exact rate, 13 years later, all cars and one horse and buggy. Now think of that. In 1900 to 1913, that is insanely fast. When you think of the technology that they had back then compared to here, over 100 years ago. Very, to me, it's impressive. So his innovation was about safer, affordable, and accessible for all Americans. In fact, what used to be a rich person's game to buy an automobile. You had to be very wealthy to own an automobile in the early part of the 20th century. But because of Ford's innovation, almost everyone could afford a car now. And I want you to keep those terms in mind, please. Particularly affordability and accessibility. Safety, of course, too. Keep those two comments in mind, because I think they keep coming up in that order. In fact, Professor Christensen in 1995, who sort of was credited for coining the term, kept over and over talking about affordability and accessibility for all users as a true disruptive innovation. It's not about inventing something cool, although that's good. Yeah, knock yourself out, invent something cool, of course. But make it affordable and accessible so everyone can use it, and that's true disruptive innovation. So in my intro, the written intro, I talk also about the S curve, because it's a very important part of disruptive innovation. It's interesting because in the S curve, down at the bottom of the S curve, when things are just rolling, there are no experts there. All the experts say is hooey. It's just hogwash. I don't want to hear about it. I've done it this way for the last 26 years. This is the way it should be. Leave me alone. But there's some early adopters that get into the game. And so you have a few adopters there at the bottom of the S curve. As time goes on, more and more adopters come into the business. They see the results. It's quite promising. It's quite interesting. And it starts to grow quite rapidly, exponentially, I might add. Exponentially. You start to see a few experts there. Then, as the item starts to really take hold, experts start tripping over each other to be part of it. Right? And in fact, they take all the credit. It's funny how that works psychologically. Down here, no experts to be found. I'm too smart for this. This is crazy. Go away. This is ridiculous. Two, oh my gosh, I knew it all along. I knew it was going to be a success. I just didn't want to say anything. That's kind of how I am. Right? That's the transformation that occurs with most disruptive innovation along this S curve. To that point, I got a couple more examples of experts. The International Energy Agency, IEA, year after year after year after year after year predicts a linear progression of acceptance of solar photovoltaic panels. And they get it wrong every single year, when in fact it's an S curve, just like we talked about. And the data proves that. The costs are reverse S curve in terms of coming down year after year after year. How can all these experts be so wrong? Well, obviously they're being conservative, you could argue. They're just doing what they do in a normal job, day-to-day job, They don't want to stick their neck out too far. I don't blame them. I understand that. But if you're going to really create a disruption and innovate, you've got to go with the curve. In fact, I'm an old guy. I keep going to old pictures. Anybody recognize this person? Thomas Edison? Okay, Thomas Edison. Everyone is famous, knows all the inventions that he did. But here's what I found really interesting. That's just how I am. He would take his proteges, or let's say candidates for proteges, to lunch as a final test of hiring he or she. And the test was, he called it the soup test. That's why I have the can of soup pictures there. And what was the test? The test was, when do you salt the soup? Do you salt it before you taste it, or do you salt it after you taste it? If you salted it after you tasted it, you got the job. That was the final test. If you salted it before you tasted it, you didn't get hired. Why? Because he felt that you were being an expert at eating soup, for crying out loud. Right? He wanted you to use the data points associated with the issue that you have at hand to make a conclusion after doing significant research and analysis. And then, and only then, make a conclusion. Don't be an expert up front without the data. Resist, resist, resist. I couldn't resist that little story. This one I'll go really, really quick. This is another one that I found in terms of just the whole notion of innovation being more rapidly implemented and appreciated in teams like yourselves, working as a group like this, and being willing to say, are you sure about that, to the expert? Imagine facing, say, a 40-year accomplished expert in a particular field and saying to he or she, well, I don't know about that. Are you sure that that applies in this case? That takes a lot of guts. It's a lot of nerve to do that. But I encourage you to politely, maybe even politely, to politely offer a polite rebuttal to that and say, well, what about, have you thought about these other conditions? Very, very important. And that's what is the key, the generalist key of being the variety, of getting to a variety of topics for solutions. And that's been proven now in studies. I couldn't resist this. So you can look that up in terms of disruptive innovations and examples of 18 disruptive innovations that have changed the world physically. One of my favorite is Blockbuster, so I have to do now show and tell. Does anybody know what this is? Yes.
It's a VHS tape.
It's a VHS tape, right? Well, guess what? Blockbuster was the king and queen of VHS tape. You went into a store, a real live store, and you found your title. They were on shelves. In this case, it's The Big Chill, one of my favorite movies. And you would rent it, and you would bring it back. And you were told, please rewind. Does everyone remember? Please be kind and rewind, I think was their motto, right? Or something like that. Okay, fine. Well, Reed Hastings, the co-founder of Blockbuster, and I apologize, I forgot. See what happens when you forget about people that don't take it to the nth degree? And then the other co-founder, Reed was trying to say to him, we gotta stop this. There's gotta be a better way. We can't do this anymore. There's gotta be a different way of accomplishing the same task. So, oh, by the way, they also had DVDs. Now, I'm from Toronto, Canada, so my Big Fat Greek Wedding was filmed in Toronto. That's why I'm showing you that. So they did have DVDs, to be fair. And then Reed Hastings said, we have to do something different. This is crazy. We just can't have people come into a store. This is not going to last. And then, because of that, he went and invented, right? Because he said there's a better way. Now, he did start with DVDs in the mail. I'm not sure if you folks are old enough to remember that. And what I found interesting was that if you look at some of the dollar values, back then, that's I think 2004, excuse me. Of course, Netflix was doing its best to provide service, and of course, Blockbuster ended up going almost to zero. There's one store left in Bend, Oregon. It's become a tourist attraction, believe it or not. Bend, Oregon, one class store. So the thing is, again, look at those words. Remember those important words? Affordable and available to a large, non-targeted market. Accessibility and affordability is a true key of disruptive innovation. Over and over again, those two words come up all the time. And by the way, look, again, does that look like a familiar S-curve? I didn't take it all the way down, but this is Netflix. That's starting to allegedly top out. I don't know. This is not financial advice to buy Netflix stock or anything like that. But it's interesting to see how the S-curve develops in almost every facet of life. Okay, back to safety. Let's get the bad news out of the way first. I always find that maybe we could start with that, get it out of the way, and then start with some happier things. Back to the marketplace. Give you an example of that, this stock. Every stock that analysts talk about, they always talk about quarters, quarter. They're not, right? Well, similarly, believe it or not, NHTSA also has a similar approach. They talk about quarters, except they talk about death. You know, it's very chilling. It's easy when you talk about money, about a company like Apple. Now you're talking about human death, and it's quite serious. And so it changes that tone of what that bar is compared to revenue and profit of a quarter. We're talking about significant deaths. And in fact, believe it or not, and I'll show you in a moment, that during COVID, the fatality rate skyrocketed. It went backwards, and I'll explain that in a minute. So here's some more data on a year-to-year basis. And if you look at that one, look how well we were doing. We got it down to 1 point. I mean, listen to me. Oh, well. Please forgive me for those folks that have suffered horrendous, life-changing crashes. In the good sense, the data was dropping like a rock to 1.08 fatalities per 100 million vehicles traveled. And then it just starts going up again. And I'll just show you. We don't have to go through the details. But there's a trend. Look pretty good, right? When you're talking about bad things, you want to see the line go down. It was going down. It was going down very clearly and obviously. Well, COVID hit. And we went back 15 years. So that fatal rate in 2022 is equal to 2007. It's like we did nothing for 15 years. All that time, sweat, money, energy, seemed like it went down the drain. You would think that. I mean, obviously not, because a lot of people were saved down here with that trend going down. And the theory is that during COVID, although you might argue, wait a minute, people weren't on the road. What are you talking about, Angela? That's crazy. That doesn't make any sense. Faster. We're going faster because of the absence of traffic. Being killed. Now, this is a picture I took while watching a video. Don't ever watch a movie with me, because I'll always do things like that. Stop! I need to take a picture of that. Stop right now. So, I was watching a documentary on CCR, and this shot came up, and I couldn't resist. I took a camera picture. I'm probably going to go to jail or something for infringement of a movie or something, but I did it anyway. So, it's for the good of the public, right? So, I saw that and I couldn't resist taking a picture of it. It was so timely with the presentation, speed killed. Now, given that it was in 1967, I have a feeling they were talking about a different kind of speed, but that's for another day. But speed really does kill. And that's why those numbers skyrocketed up so much. Okay. Story number one, way too close for comfort. So a professor by the name of William Heinrich, in his research, mostly as an industrial engineer, looking at factories and places of work, enclosed places of work, determined that for every 300 near misses, there were 29 minor injuries and one major injury potentially leading to fatality. So 300 to 29 to 1 ratio. And interestingly enough, it appears that type of analysis applies to transportation. Might be a little bit more than 300, I would imagine. I don't know of any studies, or it would be interesting to see if there is such a study out there that could prove that ratio. But certainly the concept applies. Near misses, minor injuries, major injuries, fatality, okay, in that reverse triangle approach. So I couldn't resist showing you this. Now, I need you to brace yourself. It starts really, really bad news and scary. It's full warning, full warning. It's a happy ending, but the up front is going to be a little bit painful. So please bear with me. I just want to warn you there a little bit. Hopefully I can get this to work. Let me do it this way. Brace yourself. Stop that. Let's see if I can stop that. Yeah, a little bit of help to move it forward, if you don't mind. I appreciate it. Thank you. There we go. Yeah, thank you. See, it saw you coming and it corrected itself. So that happens all the time. That's part of that 329 to 1. All those near misses. Now that was about as close to a near miss as you could humanly feasibly do. I mean, it was literally centimeters away from death. And it wasn't like it was going to be, oh, an injury. You know what would have happened if that child got hurt. Just a few more centimeters, just that tiny, maybe half a second difference would have been a disaster, right? A horrible disaster. So enter our superheroes. I'm going to talk about 3 superheroes. And the first one is complete streets to try to solve this problem. Complete streets. What's a complete street? So complete street are streets for, oh, yes.
It was already a complete street. And
Yes.
that guy just sped.
Well said. Well said. I'm going to say that again, right?
It was already a complete street, and still that guy sped. Maybe a roundabout would help.
That's a fabulous idea, and I know that there's some listeners who are roundabout experts, and maybe, I don't know if we're going to have a Q&A, time for a Q&A, they could pipe in later. That's a great point. And so that is the point, one of the points to make is that no system is perfect. That's why we never say absolute 0 or absolute 100. It's just not going to happen. It's not feasible. Except for one little thing I'll talk about in a minute. So these are the typical things about complete streets. I'm not going to go over those, but again, I can't resist over and over again those 2 daggone words. They keep popping up all the time. Access for all people, affordability, and abilities for everyone. Okay, it keeps coming up over and over again. It kind of sounds like disruptive innovation. While we were practicing complete streets, I don't even think we knew we were doing it, but we were. So to complete or not complete, that's the question. So I'll go a little bit quick through this in terms of maybe give you some concepts or ideas about what complete streets really are. You have to pick. You have to make a decision and pick. Do you mean speed or do you mean safety? You can't have both. You can't have a safe environment if you're going to say, I'm okay with speeding, I'll just fix it some other way. To let the speeding to regulate itself to stop safety. It won't work. You have to pick. So when you I scratched up the word safety, you can have speed, but you're going to compromise safety significantly. Okay? As you saw with Michael's point, that road was reasonably well designed. It had RFBs, they were flashing. Remember they were flashing? You saw they were flashing. The streets are relatively narrow. I mean, it wasn't a bad little street. It wasn't perfect. I admit, not perfect, but okay. It was all right. And yet, look what happened. Centimeters away. And who knows what else has happened that we don't know about. So, again, speed or safety? Or the other way around. Is it just safety? Well, it could be more than just safety if you say safety. If you prioritize safety and say it's about safety, this is what we want. This is our objective, our goal, and even our mission is to enhance safety. Then that's what you do, that you stick to it. That's tough, because think of it, when you're, say, a local government or a county or DOT, and you're trying to help, say, a community, but yet you get 4,000 letters and emails and calls from people just trying to drive through quickly. It's tough. It's easier said than done. It takes a lot of stamina and backbone to say, no, I'm promoting safety first. Everything else is second and tertiary. These are just some, you've seen these before, I'm sure, in terms of some elements associated with complete streets and putting the package together. This is kind of, it might be worth just a moment on this. It's more than just safety. It's health and well-being. It's environmental. It's placemaking. It's going to really change the character and the quality of a neighborhood and a society, really, in a town. I'll just go some of these a little bit quickly. So you saw that. Now, this is interesting. When I started looking at complete streets and throughout the United States, and I went back to 2000 to see what, okay, let me graph it, okay? Now the graph you're about to see here, I did not make up these numbers. This graph is a result of what you're going to see here in terms of real data. So there's 2000, and we start with 9 policies, complete streets policies of various shapes and sizes, okay? So as we progress through the years, more and more and more, look at what it's starting to look like. Does that look familiar? Very few adopters here. Starting to accelerate on a exponential curve, as predicted. Keep going. And then, oh my gosh. Oh, somehow. This is cumulative, by the way. I have a theory, I could be completely wrong, but I want to put it out there and maybe have folks discuss it amongst themselves or maybe in Q&A. I have a theory that could it be that COVID just burnt people up? That could it be that we kind of just gave up and we started to slow down on the number of policies and programs in the country? Yes, Mike.
The fact is, we did not give up. It's just that, once people were able to go out and about again, people just did. So now there's radical urbanist groups like Street Block that didn't want cars back on the road, but people should be able to choose how they get around. Here in Florida, our biggest problem is we don't have transit in every county now.
Okay, very good. And we'll open more for Q&A because I know time is limited. Thank you, Michael, for that comment. So I just pose that as a thought. I'm hoping that it is that it is the issue of COVID just wore people out and they just didn't know what to do next. And now hopefully they're back in action again. I'm hoping that, I'm hoping that this turns around and starts to go back up again in this, to parallel this. I don't know if it will. It's up to you guys. You have the power. Remember that, and I'll finish with that at the end. You have the power. Just keep that in mind. Just some examples of Florida. The next hero is Vision Zero. And I'll move a little bit quicker. Vision Zero is not about zero crashes. That is infeasible. Even if we have robotaxis perfectly connected with the infrastructure, with themselves, with people, they're still going to be a crash. It just can't be helped. It's just the way it is in humanity. So we're not talking about crashes. We're talking specifically about fatal and serious injury crashes. That is feasible. Get that to zero. And I'll share some truth of that. Here's a similar curve. It's not quite as S because it still seems to be on a trajectory of exponential growth. It's newer. I think it started in 2014. So hopefully that trajectory continues throughout the country and the world. That would be great. There's some examples in Florida. And the third superhero is the safe systems approach. And I learned a lot from Mark Doctor of FHWA. He talks brilliantly about safe streets approach. So I encourage you to follow him or to Mark Doctor with FHWA. Brilliant, brilliant man. And so you can see there's several issues here. I'm not going to go over all of them, but it's more than just 8 things. It's several things coming together to make it work. There it is, more blowing up. Okay. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on City of Lakewood, and then I promise I'll open up the Q&A. So, I worked at City of Lakewood for a while. We had the premise of SAM, safety, accessibility, mobility for all. That was my mantra. That was the team's mantra in terms of how we dealt with transportation at the City of Lakewood. Starting with the police and the fire department, they were key, and we saw that in that circle, right? They're part, post-care and pre-care are part of the systems, safe systems approach. You have to have that. That's part of it. These two entities they're folks, the first folks I went and met when I started in 2015. The first, almost like day one, I went and met with them because they became my best allies as to how to manage transportation from a non-engineering and non-planning perspective. So here they are sort of in action. But here's what I found, oh my God, heartbreaking. So I won't mention names, but one particular person at the Lakewood Police Department, this person deals with SWAT. You know what SWAT is in terms of these are the folks that are armed, and when there's an emergency condition, they go and deal with that emergency condition instantly. Bullets going everywhere, right? Even in practice, he would say that. And the same gentleman had to make where to go. Difficult task. Calling the family for fatality. Think of it. Hours ago, he had bullets going all over the place. Fearless person. Men and women that are fearless, trying to help our lives here when there's an emergency and catastrophic issues. And then he's got to pick up the dead on the phone and call a mom or a dad that their child has passed away in a car crash or severely injured. It's heartbreaking to see how these very accomplished people have a whole different perspective when it comes to dealing with humanity. It's a whole different world. And so I became very entrenched in that and could understand how difficult it would be to have that kind of a job, and yet you're dedicated to it because there's no other way to do it. There's no magic wand or button to press. You have to keep at it. More particularly in my division, I just having some fun with this. Ruby, where you go? Here it is here. He's my traffic management center supervisor, and he went and installed what's called LPI, and I'll show you what that's all in a minute. We put in something like 30 locations downtown, and basically it's a head start for pedestrians. So you can see here, and by the way, I did not pay these pedestrians to stay still. They were very obedient on their own. And hey, Michael, I'm going to just go real quick, and then we'll go to Q&A if you don't mind, because I know I'm running a little bit out of time. I apologize. So the way it works is that when it's time to go, you can see that the walk signal has come up before the green ball. Okay, now let's see if I can get this to work. I want you to feel what 5 seconds feels like as a head start. And then the green light goes on. So by the time the 5 seconds are up, depending on the width of the street, they're already past the danger zone. And in fact, 2/3 reduction in pedestrian crashes and bicycle crashes. But I was even surprised to see this, a 40% reduction in mid-trendline, vehicle-to-vehicle injury crashes. That's for free. That's bonus. So really not doing very much. That's like, talk about the highest ratio of benefit to cost you could possibly get. And it had a lot of positives with the ADA. I'll talk about that at the very end. Here's some other quick examples, and we can always come back to these if you're curious. In fact, that was in that video, right? You saw that in the video where the child almost got hurt. They had the RFPs flashing. They were working. But this is kind of interesting, going from 97% failure without them to almost 90%, not quite 90% benefit when you use them. a little bit faster. City of Lakeland has very obedient swans, as you can see. They do that really well. Other interesting ideas here. I love this story because this is the middle school in Lakeland on Lake Marion Drive in Cleveland Heights, and the parents and teachers are nervous about the students crossing this large intersection, and so we said we would experiment with a diagonal crosswalk. This is a diagonal crosswalk. Okay? And what was interesting, and when the button was pushed, all no right turn lights would go on automatically, so it would be a complete stop to all traffic for that period of time, and then of course a diagonal. Well, we kept watching, and nobody would use a diagonal until finally one young man on his bike, not on foot, on his bike, took the lead. Not this particular one, but took the lead and tried it. Once he kind of, quote unquote, approved it, everyone else followed. You need someone to be that innovator to get the ball rolling. So I just find that really interesting. Another example of where hawk signals or they're more like a hybrid system of lighting. Full disclosure, this is one of my employees. I wanted to make sure that it was safe when we did it, so he knew what he was doing. So the notice, everybody stopped and they pushed the light. I have an interesting potential academic question, and that is, I have a theory, I don't know if it's true, total theory, that I noticed, because we had cameras, that very very few people actually pushed the button. They just crossed. And even if they crossed at the site, they still didn't push the button. Maybe like 12 or 13%. I have a theory that if you have them in a systemic approach, like here on this is US 92 Memorial Boulevard, that maybe a safety zone is developed. So I don't know, Professor, if you think that might be an interesting case study to follow up on. Is there a safety benefit to having a systemic approach and not necessarily using the system as perfectly as designed? Can we benefit from non-perfect use? Just a question. And I'm going to go through this is one of my favorites here with City of Lakeland. That's what 1952, what Publix used to celebrate Florida Avenue, State Road 37 all the time. And then it became this. It just became a car-centric. This was probably taken, oh my gosh, not even 3 years ago. It's not like this is, in the 50s or something. So I'm going to go really quickly through this. This is a study that was done. And you can see, my gosh, look at this guy's back compared to where a bus or a truck would be. And there are pictures with that. I just didn't want to show them. So that's pretty bad. Yeah, all kinds of damage all the time. To the point that stores started having their people come to the back to get their stuff. There's something wrong systemically or socially from the economic development perspective when you have to, the solution is, we'll have them come to the back. That's not right. I don't know. I mean, they're crazy. That doesn't sound right. Something has to be done more systemically to solve that problem more uniquely. Of course, there's charrettes and all that good stuff. There's some examples. Some of the predictions, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Some of the perspectives of what could happen in the future if things change. Something like this. So the DOT District 1 spent almost $1 million on a pilot project to try to see if we did this, if we did a reduction, it's called a lane repurposing. If lane repurposing were to be done, what would happen to the operation? That was the only part of the pilot project. That was the basic question, among others, but that was the basic question. Oh, yeah. And so again, I'm just going to go through these really quickly because there's a lot of elements. Interesting thing. So when you start to see during the test, I'm cherry picking. I admit I'm cherry picking that bicycle crashes and pedestrian crashes went down to 0. Rear end crashes went up from the previous year, 29 to 43. And I think it's a learning curve. I like to hope so. It's a learning curve once you get used to it. I'm hoping that the subsequent data will show that number also is dropping very well. Lots of data, tons of data, all over the place. I think we ended up with having something like a 90-second to 2-minute increase during peak hour during that 1 mile stretch of time. The interesting thing is it talked about reliability. I know that it went up. It went up, no question about it. The travel time went up. But at least you know that it's going to be 4 minutes to travel this morning. Reliability is almost as, if not more important than travel time. But please keep that in mind, I would suggest. Here are some other elements getting this together. Here are some cross sections that were considered, and the winner is this one. They decided to go to, by the way, they check marked the test. It was good. Yes, ma'am.
Well, the road diet is great, and I was one of the people in the public meetings recommend the road diet because, you know, in my car, I'm so close. I've hit the curb several times. I usually hit the grades, you know.
Did this particular project?
Yeah, because this
really?
road was really functionally obsolete.
Yeah.
And they really need to extend the road diet to Pine Street.
Good point.
Because
To the north. That's to the north.
yeah, because Pine Street and to Ariana Street, it's just way too narrow.
Yeah, interesting point. Yeah.
Meet FDOT standards.
Well, that's a great point. To Michael's point, the current limits are from Lime Street to Ariana Street, and Pine is just a little bit further north. So that's a good point, Michael. Thank you for bringing that up. The good news is that there was a decision to go ahead and now do this lane repurposing, to reduce from 3 to 5 lanes with a widened mixed-use sidewalk on both sides, and still keep the continuous middle center turn lane. So, almost done, I promise. Almost done. Back to the Beetle. You can tell I like the Beetle. So this is that famous shot, I think, what, 1969? Yeah, 1969, when they crossed Abbey Road. I had to look a couple of times and remember that, yeah, Paul did not wear shoes. He was making a protest on that for some reason, about Abbey Road for some reason. And so I posed the question, is anybody safe? Because this is real. This just happened like a month ago. Let's see if I can get it to work. I hope I can get it to work. This is circle. So yeah, it did almost hit him. That was not Photoshop, or it wasn't an act. They really did that. Can you imagine? No one is safe. So I just couldn't help but
shake his hand. I would have just stopped the car, got out, and shake his hand.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe sign him an autograph too, or something like that. I just found that really, really interesting. Oh, I guess I have to go back to when I get out. A couple more stories and then I'll end. So this story, I've told this before. This is me in my little Honda Fit going to work in Lakeland, Massachusetts Avenue and US 92 with George Jenkins. And so apparently I dropped something in my car. I was at a red light, dropped something, went into the park. Okay, fine. I get a polite beep. Why would I get a polite beep? Because the light went green. Most people wait about a second and a half. They don't do it right away. Like they give you a moment to do it. So oh gosh, okay. So I forgot about the thing, went to go into drive, put my foot on the brake to the gas. And I would estimate that probably about 4.5 seconds went by that point, including the beep, the movement, drop, park, drive, all that. And then, this fully loaded truck missed me by 1 meter, by 3 feet. I just got my brakes done the week before. And I estimated that at this point, probably 7 seconds had gone by. Do all that math with the seconds going by? So apparently it just wasn't my time, because I'm in a little Honda Fit. You know what a Honda Fit is, right? It's a tiny little car. This is a heavy loaded, 55 miles an hour, 60 mile per hour truck. I would have been gone. This is in Lakeland. I probably would have been hit and sent to Tampa by the impact. It was so powerful. It would have been so powerful. So I'm going to go really quickly through here. We invented this system, although it was there all along. We just didn't know it. And that's this intersection collision avoidance safety program where we predict a red light runner by sensors, and then I think I can hopefully imagine 3 seconds. And then and only then will the green light go on in the perpendicular direction. So it's a true near misses and safety solution. So putting them all together, they become very powerful superpowers. And in fact, we did put them all together in Lakeland. And remember I said fatal serious injury crash to 0 is feasible? We're not quite there, but we're very, very close. Because over 5% in 5 years. That's a significant drop. I think that's significantly significant, or whatever the appropriate term is. And come to find out a year later in the 2021 Dangerous Life Design Report, the Lakeland Winter Haven area dropped by a further 16.4% for pedestrian safety in terms of negative crashes. So that's good news. That's a good result. So when I say 0, I mean it. We can do 0. Don't give up on 0. It can happen. I promise it can happen. There's a town in New York, I think it's called Hoboken, or a name like that. I think we're Frank Sinatra.
New Jersey, yeah.
What is it?
It's in New Jersey.
New Jersey, thank you. Where they did achieve 0 fatalities. They did. It can be done. I promise you it can be done. Well, 0 fatalities and serious injuries. Those superpowers together, you have the chance to do that. Only one of the plane that listens to the safety message, not because I'm scared, but because I love when they say put your oxygen mask on first. You need to put your oxygen mask on first. Why? Because even if you have children, don't do it. Don't put theirs on first. Do not put theirs on first. Because if something happens to you, then they're dead for sure. If you put your mask on first, then you're strong enough to at least try to help your kids or other people around you. Put your oxygen mask on first, please. Stop being worried about failure and perfection. Voltaire said, perfect is the enemy of the good. As you try to perfect and perfect and perfect over here, all these problems are continuing. You want to get it so perfect that you miss the opportunity to solve smaller problems. I say that failure is mandatory. That's how you learn, along the way. One last story, and then I promise I'll stop. So this is where I really think you could change one person's life. This is a real case. Dr. Martin Luther King Avenue and 10th Street in Lakeland. A lady on an electric wheelchair called me to say that she could not push the buttons because of the way the slope, the pole, and her wheelchair. It was just infeasible to do that. And so when I set my folks up to take a look at it, let me go back a minute. We decided, they came back and said, oh, she's right. It's horrible. We can barely do it, standing. And so I said, okay, well, we'll have to reconstruct the intersection. So I put it on what's called a CIP, Capital Improvement Program, list for it, and all that. It's the slopes and all that good stuff. And you folks remember a program called Columbo? Anybody remember that show, Columbo? Probably too young to remember that. But it was a detective. And he always had this knack. At the very first scene, he had the culprit pegged in scene 1. And he would interrogate in a very delicate way. And then he would leave the room and then almost do like a pirouette and come back and say, aha, one more thing. Well, my team did that. They pulled a Columbo. They were about to leave, all depressed, and they turned around and said, why don't we install a which won't even need the button, and it solved the entire problem. So we think we've changed this woman's life because she became empowered to use her neighborhood intersection. She didn't have to be in fear of using her own street. That's empowerment. If you have that is one story. If everyone had at least 1 or 2 stories like that, imagine what a different world we would have if we could empower people with their own freedoms. It's probably not going to work anyway, but I don't know. Should I? What the heck? So you read that I'm an alleged drummer. Okay, so I have to leave you this. I need to give it a try. So I was invited to be a drummer on a little program in front of 5 screaming fans instead of 55,000 screaming fans. Let's see if I get this story. By the way, this person here, she goes by Liz Alden. She's the current executive director of the Hillsborough County TPO. She'll sadly be retiring in November, which is very sad news. But the good news is that she's going to pursue her musical career, and here's where she let me. I'll end it. I just wanted to have a little bit of fun with that. Hopefully we could get out of this. Go to my final slide. And I'm an Italian American Canadian. So with that, I say, grazie, thank you, hey. So if you have any questions, I'd be glad to take them. Yes.
Do you think that pedestrian hybrid signals are more safer than the regular people?
So I'm always hesitant when I hear more safer or safe. I would always like to sort of caution it. So it depends on the application. Like for example, RFBs work perfectly fine on a 2-lane road where you have a fairly easy access between the 2 sides of the street. And in fact, I've even seen, in Lakeland, on Lakeland Highlands, there's a system on a 4-lane road with a median. Okay, so they work very well. They work very well. If I remember correctly, it's a 2-step process, though. You have to cross one street and then push the button again to cross the other side. With pedestrian hybrid beacons, or HOCs, as they're sometimes commonly known, they're very expensive. So you can't just throw them everywhere. They're like, gosh, about $250,000 to design and build. So they're not cheap. But they work really well. Like you saw that picture of my former employee crossing the street there. They work very well when they work. So I still offer that question. What is it about the fact that folks will not push the button many times? And even if they do, they won't wait. They'll just see a gap and cross. So a lot of study, I would recommend an opportunity here for great study with these sorts of systems. What is happening? Why don't they push the button, first of all? And if they do, why do they cross with the gap and not necessarily with the actual walk signal, oftentimes? Not always. So it would be interesting to find out more about that as to why that happens. So the more safe is it depends on the application. Yes?
In regards to the flashing beacon and hawk signals, it's, when I cross one of those, I only press the beacon as the last resort. If there's like too much traffic and they're not stopping. Yeah.
That's a really good point. So you're sort of having to dance with the traffic to say that. I admit, I've done that too. Michael's right. I've actually done that. I cross a lot at Hillsborough in 12th Street, 11th Street, excuse me. And there's a hybrid system there. And depending on traffic, I may or may not push the button. I admit it. I totally admit it. Because I'm saying, gosh, I don't want to push the button and force a mandatory stop when there are very few people there. And then finally, some poor person gets stuck. And the real reason why I do it, and I don't know, Michael, if you do it too for that, is I'm trying to improve the relationship between the motorist and the pedestrian. So if you become so demanding, then you wonder if the motorist is going to be a little bit anxious about that. But if you treat it in a way that's more respectful both ways, and then I always wave at them when they stop, always. I always wave at them to thank them, because even though it's a law and they have to stop, I think it's important to create a relationship with all users. Maybe it's the Canadian in me, I don't know, but I find that it's really important to do that and to create that relationship. Okay, if there aren't any more questions, I thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
We have some comments, I think.
Okay.
Oh,
okay.
I'm not sure if I can use my mic.
Okay.
Basically,
you want to use it?
Thank you. So, comment from the audience, maybe Ken, and he emphasized the importance of the modern roundabout as a independent component of the complete street. Basically, it said that the modern roundabouts are complete street, complete intersections, complete streets aren't complete without modern roundabouts. And also roundabouts and the both sides go together like a cheese and carrots.
Well, thank you. For those of you who don't know, Ken Sides is he's a company called Sam Schwartz, and I consider him probably one of the nation's most prominent roundabout planners and designers. So if Ken says that, then there's a lot of truth to that, and I appreciate that comment. Thank you, Ken.
We're gonna see, is there any other comment or question from the online audience and also the in-room audience?
All right.
Well, I don't see any further comments or questions.
Well, got off easy today.
All right, thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you so much. I
Asking
appreciate
questions.
it.
I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, and again, use the power. You've got it. You have this opportunity to really help change lives. I really mean that. You can do it. Work together to make it happen. And I really thank you for your time.
Thank you.